Thanks everybody for joining. I see lots of, if you want to turn your video on, go for it. I know some of you are calling from places where it's very early. Others actually from the other side of the world where it's 8 o'clock at night. So we have quite a range of people joining us today, which we really appreciate, and always great to see faces. So if you want to turn your video on, even if you're eating some breakfast or dinner or whatever, it's totally fine. So let's go ahead and get started here. Let me share my screen. All right, here we go. So welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Laura Mendelow, the founder of Mendelow Consulting Group. We're sponsoring the session today. We have these book club sessions. We call it the CliffsNotes book club session because there's no requirement to have read any of the books for any of these sessions that you come to. I would say Jerry in the crowd is the one person who does read all the books, so we can rely on him. And every facilitator who presents each month, they have read the book. So you can guarantee about 2 people anytime, but there's no shame in not having read the book. This was started years ago where I wanted to just keep track and keep in the know of latest books on leadership and business. And I didn't have time to read. So I wanted to still learn all the concepts and be able to keep up and share concepts with my clients. And so that's how this club basically started, and it just took off from there. So we are sponsoring this book club today, and Mendelow Consulting is a leadership and team development company. We believe when you get people, you get results. And we are focused on not only helping people in the workplace, but also helping leaders at home and beyond in the community. All right, so what are we doing today? What we usually do is we'll do a quick warm-up exercise, and then we'll have the actual book discussion. As I said before, it's not expected for you to have read the book. So the book discussion is usually the facilitator who will share a little bit about the book, engage you in some questions and discussion, and give you sort of the key highlights. Today, we also have our special guest author, Bruce Mao, is actually joining us today, and I'll let Jean do that introduction, but we're honored. So we're gonna do things a little differently. We typically do send out notes in advance. Today, we did not, because we're just trying to flex with the format. We're not exactly sure what will come out of the discussion, so we wanted to have the discussion first, kind of pick and choose your own adventure, and then we'll definitely send you the link to all the notes afterwards. Pass it over to you, Jean.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. The book is Bruce Mao's 24 Principles of Designing Massive Change in Your Life and Work. Now, a big title, and it's a big book. I think everybody who has the book can cuddle their book right now, and they can share on the screen the experience of the book. Bruce Mao it's been said of Bruce, he's one of the most influential designers of his generation. I love this juxtaposition. There's this Mao thing going on here with this image. He really is one of the most influential. He's a very prolific author, writer, facilitator of books, I guess is another way to look at it. More than 250 books. His website proclaims. That's, for anybody counting, that's more than 24 dozen. So there's some hyperbole for you. You take, how many people do you know with more than that? His books are so amazing that you put a book in a room and it becomes a book, or the room is so envious of his books that it wants to be one of his books. And this is one of those representations of Bruce, and maybe he can talk a little bit about that experience. He's not only one of the most influential designers of his generation, he's one heck of a businessman. He and his companies represent some of the largest organizations in the world. These are his clients. This is a small representation of Bruce's clients in the different businesses that he runs and has run. And there's a little pull-out quote there to the right. This is where Bruce begins, and Bruce's organization begins in their interactions with clients. So, just scanning through that list, you'll see a bias towards use for some reason. There's Coca-Cola, there's no slouch. Sonos, one of the biggest, fastest growing companies in the world. These are these are influential companies, and Bruce has a big influence on these very influential companies. Bruce, I'm really interested in getting you engaged in the conversation. I really want people to hear from you. So I'm wondering exactly how you feel about maybe jumping in at this point.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for the invitation, and thank you everyone for being part of this. It's really exciting. Yeah, so there's for me the methodology that the book really develops is what we call life-centered design. And it really is a transformation in the way that we think about design as a leadership methodology. If you think about the kind of core, the core methodology of design is the ability to envision a future and systematically execute the vision. And that's the best definition of leadership I could find. If you think about that ability to create a vision and really then realize the vision, that's what leaders should be able to do. And I realized that in design we have this incredible methodology that if you look at leadership discourse, there's quite a lot of anecdotal advice and encouragement, but there's not a lot of method. And design actually has a method. So you have in design a methodology of leadership, and that was really the kind of insight that came out of the process of the book. And I've been on a journey for something like 35 years. I mean, it's been a long haul.
Yeah.
To really understand where we ought to be, where we should contribute. That's really, when you look at the books that I've done, that I've authored, not just the books I've designed,
Right.
but the books that I've authored or co-authored. They're really all about the changing context, what's happening in the world, in order that we can best understand, what we can contribute and where to do it.
Bruce, one of the things I'm interested in is maybe as an entrance back into the book, it would be to talk about the book in the book's terms, without being too self-referential. As you approached MC24, what was compelling you, and maybe if I can go back to the screen, I could show following pages that are part of the first chapter, which is First Inspire.
Sure.
What did inspire you? What brought you? What made this compelling? Why MC24, and a little bit about the process around it.
Well, it started in my own experience, and I started as a graphic designer, and over a 25-year period, we evolved from graphic design to really designing practically anything. Like I've designed cities and carpets and social movements and institutions, brands and businesses, as you mentioned, and that concept of actually applying design holistically to challenges that don't fit categories is really the practice that I developed. About 10 years ago, I was made an honorary royal designer for industry at the RSA in London. And they sent a group of young leaders to Chicago to meet with me. They have a program of kind of, training young leaders.
That's the Royal Society of Architects, is that correct?
No, the Royal Society for the Arts, the RSA.
Oh, for the arts, okay.
And they have this program, the Royal Designers for Industry, that was actually started by Ben Franklin. So he started this program to bring beauty to industry, because in the Industrial Revolution, you had a lot of technologists, but they were not actually considering the kind of beauty of their products. So he wanted to bring kind of artists and industry together, as part of that, he kind of created this thing. So they sent a group of young leaders to Chicago. I showed them, the work that I do. And they said, wow, you're a really weird dude. What kind of designer are you? And I said, I'm a designer. This is what we do. And they said, how do you do it? And I said, well, I just showed you. You should have paid attention. And I was a little bit irritated with them. And they said, no, you actually showed us the results, but you didn't say anything about how you do it or how you think. And I realized that I actually didn't know. I had just evolved this method over 25 years, and we developed a practice that knew how to do it. And we kind of did it intuitively. And I realized that I don't know is probably not a good answer to that question.
Or it's the perfect one,
We started we sat down and we started to think, okay, what are the principles? Because we can't be so successful without having a real methodology. And I tried to figure out, what is the method? Are there principles that that could help other people? And it really took a long time. It took a few years to actually figure out that there were 24 of them, and
no more than that, and no less than that.
No more than that.
Precisely 24.
It was a funny thing, I tried to make it smaller. I tried to make it smaller, but couldn't. Each one was became, as I worked through the long process, 10 years. As I worked through, I realized, I really couldn't. And there was a process where, over that time they changed and kind of, eventually settled down to the 24. And we had an idea that that I thought, if I had 1 hour with you, I could teach you one of the principles. And therefore, in 24 hours, I could do all 24. So,
there you go. All right. Okay.
So we went to Australia and we did a program
of course,
called 24 Hours to Massive Change. And people's heads exploded. It was, there was a lot of crying involved.
Well, that does explain the color in the book, brains exploding. It's perfect.
And so we realized that actually we needed to slow it down and really give each principle its due. So the one that you've been looking at is the first one. And it's a first for a reason, because at the core is the idea of leadership. The idea that as a designer, you are imagining a future that you can't make people do. As leaders, we don't have the power to make people do things. We can't, I can't make my friends and family see what I'm seeing. I can't make them do it, but I can inspire them.
Yeah.
And we have the responsibility as designers to inspire. Our principal job is inspiration. So it's not a side effect or something that we hope for. It's actually something that we take as our job description.
All right.
So how do we actually get people? I mean, if I think about the work that we did for Coca-Cola, we built a platform for Coca-Cola for sustainability. And when we did that, we said, look, if you do nothing, we have a process called running the numbers. If you do nothing, the business will, over the next 50 years, produce 2.7 trillion PET bottles, and you will leave 2.2 trillion of them in the environment. Now, you don't see that. You don't have a way of actually seeing that happen. So we can visualize it for you, and we can really show you what that looks like.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that's a brand disaster, you're kidding yourself.
Right.
And so that actually, that work fundamentally changed the platform of Coca-Cola. And if you've seen lately, the last couple months, the bottling companies have announced a new kind of plastic that they can use in perpetuity. And that really came directly out of that project for Coca-Cola.
Tell us about that cover, and tell us about the binding. Tell us about how did you manage that? And that began with your inspiration. How do you get it to people? How do they execute?
Well, there's I think one important thing that we've been working on for a long time now is what we call expand the brief. Right? If you think about life-centered design, so much of what we do is about a kind of singular product or singular object, and we're really imagining how do we get to understanding that object in an ecosystem, in a kind of complex ecology of life. And so for me, that is a kind of organic process. It's a process of expanding out what we're thinking about and really trying to understand that thing in context, and really mapping that context, and then coming back to the object and going back to the ecosystem, and kind of a toing and froing process. One of the things that we developed as a methodology is a manifesto methodology. In other words, instead of trying to make the design brief as small as possible, we try to make the design brief as expansive as possible, to really think about the whole system, think about the whole, the way that these things live in the environment. Well, at the moment, we're working on a project to exit oil.
Oh, super.
For one of the big energy companies. So imagine what it would mean
Beyond petroleum.
for one of the major energy companies to say, we want to get out of oil. And what that means holistically for their enterprise. So how do we think about that enterprise as a living ecology? And I think this, for me, the concept of life-centered design that puts life and not humans at the center is such a profound shift in the way that we understand our place in the world. I mean, I think one of the greatest challenges we face is that we cut things out of their context. We take things out of their milieu and try to solve the problem as if it could be a discrete thing, instead of really seeing it holistically. And so in some ways, all the tools in the book, all the principles are about that opportunity, that challenge.
Right.
And so, for instance, Sketch is low resolution ideas, fast and cheap. That's all it is. It's not a talent for drawing. Right? You have to make a distinction between your ability to draw something accurately is not relevant here. It's really your ability to capture an idea, how good you can draw.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
in fact, everyone can do it. And that's what we prove in our work, is that anyone can do it. You have a kind of, you have a memory bank, a file of images, and you can reach into that file and use them and do things very, very quickly. And the thing about visualizing an idea is that it's democratic. The moment that you visualize it, anyone can participate, anyone can see it, and you can see it simultaneously.
So tell us a little bit about your sketching process.
Well, one of the things that we realized was that, when you're born, you know how to do it. The moment that you can sit up, you can sit in a high chair, your mom gives you a pen, and you immediately know what to do. And before long, it's a picture of mom, and it's brilliant. You know it, and so does she. And it's awesome. And it finds its gallery on the refrigerator, and you have this talent. We teach you that you don't. We train you that you don't have that talent, and we convince you by around the 6th grade that you don't have the ability to do it. It's a tragedy, and now we have to actually reteach you that you do. And so one of the things we do is we blindfold people and we ask them to draw a camel. And it's striking how anyone can do it. That everyone draws a camel blindfolded. Some of them test the boundary of camelness, but they are camels. When I think about communication, I think about what they hear, not what I say.
Yes.
In other words, most people, when they communicate, they tick the box when they've said it.
Right.
I mean, so often we hear, well,
it's a system.
I told her.
It's a system. It's McLuhan. It's the sender receiver and the noise in the middle. The noise in the middle is what gets in the way. And you've got to complete the loop. Make sure that they understood what you said, right?
Yeah. So it's really listening to what they hear and taking responsibility for what they hear, not what you say. Right. So
Right.
most of us, once we say it, we think, okay, I'm done.
Right.
I tell my people, hey, look, do this.
Right.
I told them.
Right.
Why didn't they get it?
And we take it back to brand. And I think you probably know Marty Neumeier. And Marty Neumeier says about brand, it's the brand is in the brand is in the customer's gut. It's what the customer thinks about Coca-Cola that matters. It's not what Coca-Cola thinks about Coca-Cola. Does that also resonate? I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Exactly. I mean, you have to take responsibility for what they hear. And when you do that, inspiration becomes key, because you realize that just knowing that there's a problem, just even knowing the solution isn't going to do it. That you actually have to be creative, innovative. You have to be, there's an artifice. There's a creative art to inspiring someone and to taking them to a new place. And I think one of the things that people don't realize how powerful they are in their ability to do that. If you have the ability to envision a future, it's an awesome power.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, when you're like, I like to say, look, if you think about doing something, put 9 zeros after it. That's the world now. Right? So if you do something, if you're proposing something and it succeeds, 1 billion people are going to do it.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What happens when that happens? Yeah, I mean, when we did Massive Change was a project we did 15 years ago. And it came from this extraordinary quotation by Arnold Toynbee. And Toynbee was a British historian. He wrote a 20-volume history of the world. And he said in 1957 that the 20th century would not be remembered ultimately for violence and conflict or for technology and innovation. That in the long sweep of history, looking back 300 years from now, we're going to see the 20th century instead as an era in which we dared to imagine the welfare of the entire human race as a practical objective. And when I read that, I thought, wow, that's the biggest idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Almost all my friends said, Bruce, don't touch it. It's a disaster. We didn't do that. And I said, I think we did. I actually think the data is on my side. I think we are doing that. We're committed to it more and more. And that it's really stunning that we don't believe it. We don't think that that's actually what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so we did 20 person years of research to figure out whether or not that was true. And it turns out to be so radically true that it's really stunning that it's not our common understanding of who we are.
Yeah. That gets to scarcity thinking as well, right? I mean, that part that lays in there somewhere.
Well, what you realize is that, what we realized in that project was that we live a designed life. Your life is a designed life. Just watch the next few days, what you're doing and how you live. You live inside of designed experiences. You interact through designed interfaces. You drive designed products through designed landscapes. Your life is a designed life. And the quality of that design is the quality of your life.
Bruce, I know you have to jump off, and I know you're in Central Time, so we appreciate you waking up extra early to join us. Is there
My
any
pleasure.
parting words before you leave?
Well, I think, I'm so inspired and encouraged by people like the people on this call. I mean, think about what you're doing. You're trying to figure out how to improve the world, how to make the world a better place. Waking up every day, trying to contribute, trying to help move the world in the right direction. I think there's never been greater urgency, never in our history, to really think about where we are in the world and how we're going to live and work. And over the next decade, we are going to see such profound and fundamental change. And the idea of life-centered design is to put life and not humans at the center. But ultimately, we have to think about how we live in a way that is compatible with all of life and not just us. I mean, we've, for most of our history in the West especially, really only thought about our own well-being, our own welfare, our own wealth and in our own kind of place. And what we've learned over the last few decades is that that's not going to be the future. That's not going to work. That ultimately, we have to redesign everything we do to be compatible with the rest of life, with all other living things. And I think that it's such a fundamental challenge. There is unlimited scope for contribution. And I think I've always thought that the biggest challenges are the biggest opportunities. The wealth that will be created by the people who solve these problems will be off the charts. It will be unimaginable. The opportunity, I think, for people like the people on this call is really extraordinary to contribute in a really important way.
Next month, we actually have Emily Giacomini on the call with us. So thanks, Emily, for joining today. She will be facilitating our next discussion on designing your life, which is another very creative book that goes through a lot of exercises and just very inspirational to help you through career planning. And actually, it also just bleeds into designing in general. So I encourage you to come back. If you haven't figured it out by now, but I think all of you probably been on this site to register. If you want to register for any of the books, we just post it all on the portal here. So register, it's a slightly different new registration process. Just register for any book that looks interesting to you. But the best kept secret for sure is that we have all of these books archived. It's not a traditional book review, but it's a review from our discussion. So we keep the discussion notes. If you just click on the link or click on the book, you'll be able to review all the books. And it goes back pretty far. So we now have quite a collection. Again, I have a terrible memory, so I keep this for myself and figured might as well share it with all of you so you can enjoy that as well. Emily, do you want to talk any more about the book for next month?
I look forward to meeting with you all. If you have a chance to get it and start taking a look, it really is a lot of exercises. So really more something that you work through than that you read. And they're fun. They're eye-opening. So I'd encourage you to check it out and meet us back in a month.
Excellent. All right, I think that concludes our session today. Really great to see everybody online. Appreciate you guys joining. We will send out a recording of just the key components from Bruce's conversation with us today. Jean, thank you so much for setting this up and your connection with Bruce. and just introducing us to this book. So, and the whole community. So
Thanks.
Really was a pleasure.
Laura, you're doing an amazing thing with this, and I so appreciate all the effort that you and your team put into this. This is meaningful. This is authentic. This is great. This is terrific, and I'm really happy that I could be this today with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you next month, hopefully. All right, bye everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.